I felt really sorry for you when I heard that they'd left you out. Aroma, of course, you'd expect to get more than anyone else. I don't blame her at all. In fact, I think it's owing to her. Let's be honest, none of us can compare with Aroma. I mean, even if she didn't always take so much trouble over everything, no one would want to quarrel about her having a bigger share. What makes me so angry is that people like Skybright and Mackerel should count as top grade when everyone knows they're only put they are only put there to curry favor with Bao Yu. Doesn't it make you angry? I don't see much point in getting angry, said Crimson. You know what they said about the mile-wide marquee? Even the longest party must have an end. Well, none of us is here forever, you know? Another 3 or 5 years from now, when we've each gone our different ways, it won't matter any longer what all the rest of us are doing. Little Melilot found this talk of parting and impermanence vaguely affecting, and a slight moisture was to be observed about her eyes. She thought shame to cry without good cause, however, and masked her emotion with a smile. That's perfectly true. Only yesterday Bao Yu was going on about all the things he's going to do to his room, and the clothes he's going to have made and everything. Just as if he had 102 years ahead of him with nothing to do but kill time. Crimson laughed scornfully, though whether at Melilot's simplicity or at Bao Yu's improvidence is unclear, since just as she was about to comment, a little maid came running in, so young that her hair was still done up in 2 little girls' horns. She was carrying some patterns and sheets of paper. You're to copy out these 2 patterns. She threw them in Crimson's direction and straightway darted out again. Crimson shouted after her. Who are they for, then? You might at least finish your message before rushing off. What are you in such a tearing hurry for? Is someone steaming wheat cakes for you and you're afraid they'll get cold? They're for Mackerel. The little maid paused long enough to bawl and answer through the window, then picking up her heels went pounding off. Plim-plam, 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 as fast as she came. Crimson threw the patterns crossly to one side and went to hunt in her drawer for a brush to trace them with. After rummaging for several minutes, she had only succeeded in finding a few worn-out ones, too molted for use. Funny, she said, I could have sworn I put a new one in there the other day. She thought a bit, then laughed at herself as she remembered. Of course, Oriole took it the evening before last. She turned to Melilot. Would you go and get it for me, then? I'm afraid I can't, said Melilot. Miss Aroma's waiting for me to fetch some boxes for her. You'll have to get it yourself. If Aroma's waiting for you, why have you been sitting here gossiping all this time? Said Crimson. If I hadn't asked you to go and get it, she would have been waiting, would she? Lazy little beast. She left the room and walked out of the gate of Green Delights and in the direction of Bao Chai's courtyard. She was just passing the drenched blossoms pavilion when she caught sight of Bao Yu's old wet nurse, Nanny Lee, coming from the opposite direction, and stood respectfully aside to wait for her. Where have you been, Miss Lee? She asked. I didn't expect to see you here. Nanny Lee made a flapping gesture with her hand. What do you think, my dear? His Nibs has taken a fancy to the young fellow who does the tree planting, Yin or Yun, or whatever his name is, so Nanny has to go and ask him in. Let's hope their ladyships don't find out about it. They'll be in trouble if they do. Are you really going to ask him in? Yes, why? Crimson laughed. If your Mr. Yun knows what's good for him, he won't agree to come. He's no fool, said Nanny Lee. Why shouldn't he? Anyway, if he does come in, said Crimson, ignoring her question, you can't just bring him in and then leave him. Miss Lee, you'll have to take him back again yourself afterwards. You don't want him wandering off on his own. There's no wondering who he might bump into. Crimson herself was the secret hope. Gracious me, I haven't got that much spare time, said Nanny Lee. All I've done is just to tell him that he's got to come. I'll send someone else to fetch him when I get back presently. One of the girls, or one of the older women, maybe. She hobbled off on her stick, leaving Crimson standing there in a muse, her mission to fetch the tracing brush momentarily forgotten. She was still standing there a minute or two later when a little maid came along who, seeing that it was Crimson, asked her what she was doing there. Crimson looked up. It was Trinket, another of the maids from Green Delights. "Where are you going?" Crimson asked her. "I've been sent to fetch Mr. Yun," said Trinket. "I have to bring him inside to meet Master Bao." She ran off on her way. At the gate to Wasp Waste Bridge, Crimson ran into Trinket again, this time with Jia Yun in tow. His eyes sought Crimson's and hers as she made pretense of conversing with Trinket, sought his. Their two pairs of eyes met and briefly skirmished. Then Crimson felt herself blushing and turned away abruptly. She made off for Allspice Court. Our narrative now follows Jia Yun and Trinket along the winding pathway to the House of Green Delights. Soon they were at the courtyard gate, and Jia Yun waited outside while she went in to announce his arrival. She returned presently to lead him inside. There were a few scattered rocks in the courtyard, and some clumps of jade-green plantain. Two storks stood in the shadow of a pine tree, preening themselves with their long bills. The gallery surrounding the courtyard was hung with cages of unusual design in which perched or fluttered a wide variety of birds, some of them gay-plumaged exotic ones. Above the steps was a little five-frame penthouse building with a glimpse of delicately carved partitions visible through the open doorway, above which a horizontal board hung, inscribed with the words Crimson Joys and Green Delights. "So that's why it's called the House of Green Delights," Jia Yun told himself. "The name is taken from the inscription." A laughing voice addressed him from behind one of the silk gauze casements. "Come on in. It must be 2 or 3 months since I first forgot our appointment." Jia Yun recognized the voice as Bao Yu's, and hurried up the steps inside. He looked about him, dazzled by the brilliance of gold and semi-precious inlay work, and the richness of the ornaments and furnishings, but unable to see Bao Yu in the midst of all of it. To the left of him was a full-length mirror, from behind which two girls now emerged, both about 15 or 16 years old, and of much the same build and height. They addressed him by name and asked him to come inside. Slightly overawed, he muttered something in reply and hurried after them, not daring to take more than a furtive glance at them from the corner of his eyes. They ushered him into a tent-like summer cabinet of green net, whose principal furniture was a tiny lacquered bed with crimson hangings heavily patterned in gold. On this, Bao Yu, wearing everyday clothes and a pair of bedroom slippers, was reclining, book in hand. He threw the book down as Jia Yun entered and rose to his feet with a welcoming smile. Jia Yun swiftly dropped knee and hand to floor in greeting. Bidden to sit, he modestly placed himself on a bedside chair. "After I invited you round to my study that day," said Bao Yu, "a whole lot of things seemed to happen one after the other, and I'm afraid I quite forgot about your visit." Jia Yun returned his smile. "Let's just say it wasn't my luck to see you then. But you have been ill since then, Uncle Bao. Are you quite better now?" "Quite better, thank you. I hear you've been very busy these last few days." "That's as it should be," said Jia Yun. "But I'm glad you are better, Uncle. That's a good piece of fortune for all of us." As they chatted, a maid came in with some tea. Jia Yun was talking to Bao Yu as she approached, but his eyes were on her. She was tall and rather thin, with a long oval face, and she was wearing a rose-pink dress over a closely pleated white satin skirt.